Welcome to the Craft of Coaching podcast, where we dive into what it truly takes to become a skilled, confident life coach. I'm your host, Kate, head of the CLCC, or Certified Life Coach Collective, an ICF-Accredited Level 1 coach training program. We combine courage, coaching, and community to offer you more than just a training program, but a life-changing experience where you use your own personal transformation as the learning ground for supporting your clients. On this podcast, we explore how you can use coaching skills to support your clients or expand your own growth, all grounded in evidence-based coaching practices. Learn more about our program and get free resources for becoming a life coach at teamclcc.com. And now, here's today's episode. Hey there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Craft of Coaching. I'm Kate Swoboda. Today, I have the pleasure of talking with Lara Heacock of Kind Over Matter. Now, Lara's story is a really interesting and wonderful one to me. I first met her back in 2014 when she joined the Certified Life Coach Credential, or CLCC, coach training program. She loved what we were up to in the program and wanted to continue with the community. She joined our leadership team. She ended up actually sort of ascending the ranks and becoming one of our top lead coaches. And she, during this entire time, has built her business while having a full-time salaried job and running the website kindovermatter.com. And kindness is really at the heart of what Lara does in all of her coaching work, and really I'd say in all of her life. And I've also been really excited to hear that Lara has been branching out into executive coaching. For those of you who are considering getting into coaching and you're not sure whether or not you want to do anything entrepreneurial, I would really encourage you to consider whether or not you would be interested in coaching executives, not necessarily on topics related to, being the best CEO that you can be, but on topics like communication or really being accountable or really stepping up into your life with integrity and leadership. Because any CEO who isn't doing that in their personal life isn't going to be able to do that very successfully in their professional life. So Lara has been developing her business in the direction of executive coaching, which I think is just a really great direction to go in, because if you can get hired by one company to be their sort of on-call executive coach, then whenever different issues arise within the company and someone needs personal coaching, you become the person that they're going to call. There are a lot of different ways that somebody can be a coach in this world. You do not have to just do the route of, going online and getting a website set up. It's certainly a worthy route to take, but that's not the only route to take. And I really admire Lara for looking at alternative ways of honing her craft as a coach. So here we go, Lara Heacock of Kind Over Matter, and she's going to share with us some great stuff on her craft of coaching. Here we go. So let's settle in with the first question, which is, walk us through a little bit about what it is that people are struggling with when they come to you. And when I've been asking people this question this season of Craft of Coaching, it doesn't have to just be one-on-one clients. It could certainly be anybody that you've done executive coaching with, as I know you've done. It could be workshop participants or people that you've reached on teleseminars, but really trying to root into, as a starting point, some of the common themes that people are saying that they're struggling with, and that has them seek out the help of a coach such as yourself.
Yeah, awesome. Definitely. So I would say, if I had to pick one word, I think it would be conflict. So when I've worked with companies and worked with their leaders, oftentimes the leaders are in conflict, sometimes with each other, sometimes there's some issues with the team. And when I work with people individually, one-on-one, there's some sort of conflict with themselves. Maybe their expectations are really high and they're not meeting their own personal expectations. They're just feeling, super burned out, stressed out, can't keep up with things anymore. But it's funny, as you were asking that question, I've never actually used this word before, but really it's some sort of conflict, whether it's with another in a corporate setting or whether it's with yourself in an individual setting.
That's really interesting. And when I think of conflict, I think of tension. I think of like
Hmm.
a rope that's being pulled into completely opposite directions. And often that's like the tension between what we really want to do and what we feel like we have to do, or the tension between, I would imagine, at the executive level, one person's vision and another person's vision, stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. One person's way of leading versus another person's way of leading. One person's, desire for how something will run operationally versus another person's desire. One on one, it's more, really, like you said, I feel like I should be doing this list of 742 things and I can only accomplish 741 and I don't know what to do about it. So, there's that natural pulling and sort of just conflict that arises when those situations come up.
Okay, so I can ask this question somewhat in jest, I think, because I know how you coach. But like the kind of jesting question that I want to ask is like, okay, Lara, so how do you remove the conflict forever by having them, make a plan and then execute the plan? Which so
Well,
instead of asking the question that way, I'll go to so what do we do when we've got someone who is in conflict in their life, or when you are going into an executive coaching situation, there's conflict within an organization? Like, what is the entry point?
so the entry point, and I am extremely transparent with people. I tell them this in, the first consultation before, I'm hired, before there's any contract signed. The very first thing I tell them is this is not a quick fix. And what we do here is we learn how to manage this. We don't learn how to overcome it. So using a personal situation, the joking example I use, like, I have 742 things on my list and I can only fit 741 in the day. And then whatever, insert self-criticism that comes in after the fact. And, what I really try and emphasize to people is that voice might always be there. That conflict might always be there. That feeling might always be there. But what we're going to do is we're going to help to take it out of the driver's seat. So it might be a
Mm,
passenger some days. It might be in the back seat other days. Some days it might be in the trunk and you might almost forget it's there. And then some days it's going to come back and it's going to try and push you over and it's going to try and steer for you. We're going to learn how to work with it in all of those different ways, because the fact is it just doesn't go away, and that's okay. And I don't want anyone to have any unrealistic expectations. We're going to learn how to work with it instead of thinking that we're going to abolish it with a 5-step plan.
I love that. I love that metaphor too. And in the people I've been interviewing for this season, I've noticed how often metaphor has come up in order to help a client or a group of people see that this big thing that feels like the hardest thing in the world to try to find your way to the other side of actually is okay. Like, everybody's
Mhm.
okay. We're going to be okay,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
hmm hmm Yeah. And so, okay, so the entry point, and I love there's that transparency, and the entry point also involves sort of naming the place of how things are going to change when the conflict is not the dominant thing on the scene, and that's a part of client education, and that's great. um, what are some things you specifically do from a craft perspective with people or organizations to try to get them to break up their old ways of doing things? Because habits are hard to break, especially ways of being. And
Mhm.
I would imagine at the executive level there's this added tension of not wanting to like lose face in front of your peers that must be very difficult. um,
Yeah. So
yeah.
sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm totally ready. I've set up the question.
So I'll speak to sort of the corporate, executive leadership level, because I think that's probably, a little bit different than maybe what, a lot of folks are familiar with. And so the very first thing that I do is, say, for example, it's two leaders that are in conflict. The first thing that I do is divide and conquer. So I separate them. I talk to them both individually, and I really try and I get to the point where we're really keeping it real. So first step is let's get to the heart of it. Let's get real. Let's figure out what's going on. Let me hear your side. I let them both know, I'm not here to take sides. I'm not here to be won over. I'm not here to tell anyone that they're right and anyone that they're wrong. I'm here to listen. I'm here to facilitate. I'm here to provide an alternate perspective that perhaps you haven't been exposed to. So first step is really just getting to know the heart of what they think is at the source of the conflict. And with two people, you'll get about 27 different things that are at the source of the conflict. And then after a little bit of time, sort of getting to the heart of it with them, doing a little bit of, shifting of how they're thinking about things, some coaching around a different way to approach things, like some really tactical things come into this where, okay, when you walk into his office and he doesn't look up from his computer, you need to say this. And, when you're busy and she walks into your office and you don't want to look up from your computer, you need to do this. So really tactical of like, this is how we need to approach things differently. Then I bring them together. And then we put it all out on the table. It's very transparent. It's very much of, this is what A feels is at the heart of it. This is what B feels is at the heart of it. Ironically, most of the times it comes down to the exact same thing. Once you get past the initial 27 stories, it always comes down to one thing. Trust is usually one of the big things at the heart of that. Sometimes it's been violated. So then we start talking about how, there's a lot of components to trust. We can't rebuild it right away, but really the pivotal point comes when they're finally in the room together. And usually they start by not looking at each other. And then generally by the end of that first point, there's at least, appropriate eye contact during communication. They're not talking about each other in the third person when they're both in the room. So it's really coming together. Oh, yeah. No, not even kidding. Can't make it up. So that's sort of the evolution of it. And then it's, individual work and then, more of that. It's sort of a process of coming apart and coming together, coming apart, coming together, doing the internal work, then looking externally, doing some more internal work, then applying it externally and really walking that line.
Well, when you were talking, you just outlined from an executive coaching model working with two people in the workplace, but a lot of what you just described would actually apply to an individual coaching session as well. Because in an
Mm-hmm.
individual coaching session, it's like if one person is struggling with something they fear to do, you're going to try to dialogue and get, well, what's fear's side of things? Why is fear, throwing up so many barriers to you going after
Mm-hmm.
this thing that you want? Or what's the role of sadness? Or what's the role of excitement? What gets you excited? What's the role of vision? What's your vision? So there are all these parts that are kind of happening even within one individual that all need to be heard, and everybody, all the parts need to sort of know, hey, change is coming. Here's what we're going to be doing as change is coming. Vision is going to start leading the way. And fear, I'm going to need you to say what it is that you have an issue with, but you need to understand that vision is the one leading. Or I mean that's kind of the comparison that I immediately draw.
Mm-hmm. No, I completely agree. And it's interesting, sort of taking that to a multiple person setting, but it's all, it is all very, very similar. It's a lot of talking about, okay, well, what is said versus how it's heard. And we have that internal dialogue within ourselves. My husband may say something to me that to him is meaningless, but I hear it as, a mountain instead of a molehill. It's the same within or between two people as it is within ourselves.
Definitely. And so, I was just thinking too, like, of all the exercises or practices or things that you love to offer to clients, what's a one that stands out for you as being a particular favorite?
My favorite, and probably the first thing I have people do, is learn how to pause. Whether it's pause before taking an action, whether it's pause before speaking, whether it's pause before making a decision, that's my very favorite, usually first thing to teach people. So if you are struggling with, overcommitting and saying yes to everything, and you're just completely overwhelmed and you have no idea how to start saying no to things, the very first thing I teach people to do is to just not give any answer, to just go with the, hey, thanks for the invitation. I'll get back to you tomorrow. To build in that space where you can be out of the anxiety of the moment and then make a thoughtful decision. Because in the moment, the fear, the pattern, the habit wants you to just say yes, 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 yes. But if you've committed to changing that habit and you really want to know how to take the first step is just inserting some space and giving yourself that freedom and that new way of doing things that opens up the possibility of making that harder decision.
hmm It's amazing how the simplest practices for clients can really make the biggest difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, literally the simplest, that simple idea of just not giving any answer in the moment is, it can literally be life-changing. I mean, it can literally take someone from being overwhelmed and stressed out and fighting with everybody around them to having a more balanced schedule and, a more harmonious feeling, because they didn't have to do the big scary thing. I'm a big believer in baby steps. I call it light switch change, that off and on stuff that, sells really big out in the marketplace. I don't believe in that, because I really want sustainable change for my clients. And I feel like the thought no is a complete sentence is valid, and it's also extremely intimidating if you are a middle-aged person who's been a people pleaser their whole life. So let's start small and let's work up to the place where you can just learn to say no, but I want you to be able to get there without fear getting so big that you just run away from it and stop all the work.
I love that because I know that one of the critiques of coaching is that, well, like, come on, it's just common sense. Pausing before you make a decision. Like, you don't need a coach. You just need some common sense. I've heard people who are skeptical of the coaching industry say things like that, and it's like you've just made a great point, which is, well, it might be common sense for someone for whom that's easy to do, but for somebody who has literally spent decades of their life, and particularly in a work environment where you are often
Mm-hmm.
expected to be a yes for the team,
Mm-hmm.
that moment of stopping and pausing and saying, I'm going to get back to you on that, especially if you've been the person who's always been the one handling things for everybody else, and that's part of what's fed the pattern of getting overwhelmed, getting burned out at work. I mean, this is difficult stuff to turn around. It's
Mm-hmm.
not as simple as you say it. I love it. A light switch moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to tell someone like that they have to immediately start saying no to their boss, or they're uncoachable, or they're never going to, whatever. That, yeah, to me, it's a huge disservice. I mean, it's awful. Like, it kills me. It breaks my heart that people are, they think they can never change because they think that's the only option. I'm like, no, 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 no. Come this way. It's fine. We can work with this. I promise.
Yeah, part of the work is actually getting at all the stories that keep someone, the internalized narratives that keep someone from taking the steps that are quote unquote common sense, and that's something that I think that, at least whenever I've been in the client role with a coach, having someone who can reflect back to me, here are the stories that I hear that have you stuck, and getting to hear it outside of myself and then even consider an alternative interpretation is enormously powerful.
Yeah, and I also really build in, the freedom to fail. And when we
Hmm.
don't do that, when a client comes back and says, like, oh, I said yes to everything this week, I didn't remember to pause and I didn't do it. My response is always, that's okay. It's
Hmm.
absolutely okay. Because if we spend, an hour dissecting how that's terrible, it's just going to add something more to the pile of things that we're trying to dismantle. So natural change involves a couple steps forward and often some steps backwards. And that's just part of the process. And to make that acceptable and to build in that, that self-kindness and that permission to fail is a huge part of the way to actually get to long-term success.
Well, I love that you mentioned kindness too, because you run the website Kind Over Matter, and really building in self kindness as a predominant thing to come back to, a guiding thing to come back to, has been at the heart of the work that you do.
Yeah, it's kind of my jam. Yeah, I'm all about it, and it takes many forms. Sometimes self-kindness looks like setting a boundary, and sometimes self-kindness looks like exactly what I just said, and it's letting yourself off the hook when you made the wrong choice, even though you knew exactly what the right choice was. And to, instead of going into the old pattern of beating yourself up for making that wrong choice, to look at it from, okay, this is a bump in the road. I know I want to make the right choice, and I'm going to try again next time. Like, to make that little bit of shift for how you engage with yourself. And, and in my next venture is taking this, more into the corporate world and in workshop seminar format, to bring kindness back into business. It's such a powerful shift. The way we treat ourselves mirrors the way we treat each other. And shifting one always impacts the other.
Well, and the corporate world is so in need of kindness, especially
Oh
for
my
the
gosh.
people who work in the corporate world, because it's, yeah. Well, thank you so much for stopping by the Craft of Coaching podcast and sharing a bit about what you do. Now, I want to make sure I get this right, that we can find you in two places. We can find you at Kind Over Matter, but then your corporate coaching work is also coming out under laraheacock.com.
Absolutely. It should be live fall of 2017, and we're under construction right now. But yes, the corporate executive work will live at laraheacock.com right now. Everything self-kindness is all at Kind Over Matter.
Okay, awesome. And Lara, if you want to look her up, anybody, Lara is spelled Lara. And as Lara, I know you yourself say, like a Lara bar.
Yes,
Because that's what.
exactly. One of my favorite snacks. I love snacks.
All right. Well, thank you again so much for being here today. Everybody go check out Lara over at kindovermatter.com.
All right, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Before you go, would you help us out and take a moment to give us a rating in iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you're listening? It really helps us get the word out to other listeners. And before you go today, would you like free resources to support your coaching journey? Whether you're considering becoming a coach or you want advanced coach skills training, access our coaching resource library at teamclcc.com. Again, that's teamclcc.com. Can't wait to connect with you, and again, thanks for listening.